Welcome to Next in Tech, an S&P Global podcast where the world of emerging tech lives. I'm your host, Eric Hanselman, Chief Analyst for Industry Research at S&P Global. And today we're going to be talking about a lot of what's going on at NRF, the National Retail Federation. And joining me to discuss it is one of the analyst team who is there, Sheryl Kingstone. Sheryl, welcome back to the podcast.
Thank you, Eric. Glad to be back.
It is great to have you here. There's been so much we've been talking about with everything that's happening with agents in AI and all of the different pieces that are all coming together in terms of really seeing what agents can do. In retail, we've talked about customer experience. NRF is the place where a lot of the actual action of what's taking place in a lot of this is really seeing the light of day for the first time. What did you see out there and what was your take?
Yeah, interesting. Not a shocker. Right? It's going to be all about agentic. And years before, all about unified commerce. Actually, even years before that, it was all about mobile. And this year, it was all about agentic experiences. And what's really interesting about retail is the fact that it is across the entire value chain, right? So when you think about the NRF, a lot of it is dominated by in-store, which is good. And we'll dive into a little bit more about that probably in a few minutes. But what I'm trying to get at is the retail experience is from the point of interaction, the first time you're trying to market it with these agentic experiences, all the way through the supply chain. And you've got IoT devices, you've got everything under the sun on the show floor at NRF, and consistently everyone was talking about agentic experiences, orchestration, data, and what we can do to really improve the next generation of retail.
Well, we've talked a little bit in the previous episodes. We were talking about AI use cases and some of what really we were going to tackle in terms of agentic capabilities. This is a point at which it's made real. And at the point at which we're actually trying to get some of the agent capabilities that actually doing real work. It's something where I guess, we've talked about the progression from the chatbot kinds of interactions for customers. And this is really getting into, I think, some of the first stages of what we really are considering agents able to do, being able to imbue them with a certain amount of trust. But it sounds like while there were a lot of very forward-looking applications, a lot of use cases out there, the practical pieces are still fairly early stages just in terms of customer and trust. It's something you were talking about in some of the data that we've seen also in terms of the level of trust that customers are willing to put into these environments. How do you see that balance between the bright, shiny future kinds of applications that were on the show floor and where customers are in terms of what are they willing to go for and how's that going to move forward? It seems like that's the big trade-off here.
It is, but as much as we think this is just this revolution, I've said this before on your show, it's not. It's an evolution of the use cases that we've been doing. So a lot of it is around product discovery. A lot of it is around improving customer service. A lot of it is making sure that what we were doing in the past, we're just doing better, right? So we've been tracking a lot of these customer experiences across the buying journey and, the famous revenue gain versus revenue lost. And we're still right in the middle of all of this. But the ability to move that chatbot experience, right, from a hard-coded, predefined, very poor experience where satisfaction levels were abominable, like at 25% satisfaction. I mean, that's low. Put that in context, voice is in the high 70s and even email is in the 70s for satisfaction. So the fact that it was that low and everyone was really looking at it for operational efficiencies was something that needed to be dealt with. Now, what changed, as everyone knows, is the chatbots now have more LLM capabilities that a lot of these retailers are bringing to the table through partnerships with either their software vendors or They're LLM providers. They're not building these themselves, right? So they're partnering and they're using some of these technologies to really scale and improve these interactions. And that's what's really changed. The reasoning engines has changed. We've had natural language processing, but now we have true conversational. We're actually using multimodal. So we're going from voice to text to voice. We're putting it not just in the service environment, but we're putting it throughout that buying journey. So it's able to do things like cross-sell personalization recommendations at point of interaction. That's where real time comes in. We're able to now even, and this is what is new, starting to understand how we're going to transact even in the OpenAI, ChatGPT environments where consumers, we track $22 billion in new purchases due to the improved product discovery from a chatbot and an AI assistant. That's within some of these other experiences that are fairly new. Now it's hard. It was probably over either a website or whether it on ChatGPT is, a little bit hard for the consumer to grasp, but we're on our way to improving these customer experiences.
So, this is more than just if you like this, then maybe you should like this kinds of things. And granted, improving those recommender kinds of results are certainly very valuable. But when you're talking about a 22 billion number, that's an opportunity that people are going to pay attention to in terms of what that improvement can potentially yield. How much further do you have to go to achieve that? We get back to this issue of, how do you ramp up levels of maturity so that you can get that level of customer engagement? That's, again, when you're talking about those kind of numbers, that's an incentive.
Yeah, that's a good point. And so one of the things I really talk about in a report, the ending around what to watch, it's how you're going to scale without breaking trust, right? And that's really where we're at. So we're in pilots today, and we really need to make sure we're growing those pilots and really design to make sure we're using them appropriately across some of the journeys. We need to improve our data foundations. That's truly important. We need to make sure that we've been talking about this for ages. Where is the data? How are we going to train it? How are we using our agent control plane? And we could talk about that in a little bit. These invisible interfaces I talk about are becoming the norm. So how are we using conversational voice? When are we embedding these experiences? What data is it using? Again, around a trusted data governance environment. And we have to make sure that it isn't just let loose, right? So while we love autonomy, human in the loop is absolutely essential. So consumers' comfort with all of these, we're not going to have these autonomous agents running wild, booking these trips, as everyone out there is talking about, agent to agent experiences, go out, buy me my trip, and then ship me my ticket. I'm joking here. But the humans, like you and me, want the assistance. And that's the key word. It's not you could say co-pilot, but I think we've gone beyond co-pilot because they're more intelligent. We're giving it goals and objectives and things, and then it's coming back. So it's taking the grunt work out of a lot of what we're doing, whether it's the grunt work for the employee or the grunt work for the consumer. But right now we're comfortable with looking at that, making recommendations, and we're going to make the decision and then execute.
Well, Melissa and Sarah was talking about the importance of memory and the addition of sufficient context into agentic operations. It seems like the memory piece is that fundamental element of data. It's ensuring that you've got enough information, because the point that you made about scaling while maintaining trust seems like the real trick to this, which is that it's knowing what to hang on to, knowing what data is important for the particular transaction, and being able to have this longer term ability to be able to interact with customers, to be able to say, oh, I know, Eric, you like a window seat, and things beyond that. Well, I know you like the window seat, but you don't want the one all the way in the front. It seems like we're getting to a point at which we've got to really add a lot more depth to the data that we're integrating with these agentic actions to give enough integration, to give enough trust to make that work well. And that seems like that presents a new set of challenges in terms of what retailers have to do and enterprises broadly to make agentic really work well. We're not talking about, we've kick around the term context engineering. This seems to be one of these challenges with engineering the kind of data that we're using to build that context for some level of satisfaction, or to raise that level of satisfaction, to improve the output, and at the same time, still maintain that trust with the end user.
Right. But see, here's the thing, and I totally agree with Melissa and yourself around memory, but this isn't anything new, right? I've been writing about customer intelligence platforms that talked about customer memory since 5 years before COVID, right? Everyone has pre-COVID, post-COVID, right? So this whole reasoning and context isn't new. The ability to part context. The problem is we didn't have the data properly. We talked about preferences and we talked about observed versus stated. And we've had some basic policy guardrails and we've had some basic orchestration, but it's mostly been on the enterprise application side. Now we need to open this up into what I would call an AI agent control plane, right? That has all the governance, that has the observability, that has the trust. And then underneath that has that orchestration, has those policy and guardrails, has the reasoning and context with human in the loop, with monitoring and audit, right? So we have experience doing this. We now have to grow beyond that and use that in, I would say, this reasoning and action execution agent world. But you were going to say something, so jump in on that.
Okay. Well, what I was about to jump in on was I was thinking back to points that you have been making for ages and ages about the important part of what was originally the omnichannel conversation.
Yes.
And what was the hard part about omnichannel? It was the point that you've been making about integrating all of the various data, the data assets, and being able to share that data across these multiple modes of interaction. This is just, as you were pointing out, the same kind of thing that people should have been doing, way back when. We've had a lot of challenges in, just now writ that much larger with agents.
Yes. And we still have a lot of challenges with it, right? But it shouldn't have been a nice to have back then. But we had a lot of other tech debt. We had a lot of data silos that we're trying to uncover. We didn't have the, shall I say, scalability of using the data, the trainability of using the data, the ability to get the use cases at a truly operational return. So this is where it's like, okay, I need to do this. We've moved from a nice to have to a need to do this. So the reason for this is when I look across that customer lifecycle, and we've talked about the buying lifecycle and everything. So let's see what's changed with the AI agents, right? Usually we'd say, okay, we're going to have marketing campaigns. Then you're going to drive someone to a social, or you're going to drive someone to the website. None of that has changed. The only thing that's added is now you get complexities of the OpenAIs and chat and the LLM scenario. So we now have LLM optimizers, right? So we used to talk about listening. We have to listen to what they're doing. That was all voice of the customer and listening. Well, now we're talking about sensing. Finally, customer understanding and signal detection. So that's when real-time customer profile identity comes into play. That's where we can truly act on the data because we have the memory now for anomaly detection, fraud detection, ad content generation and targeting, right? So that sensing really becomes important. Now, let's move into engage. This is where we're talking about proactive and contextual interactions, right? So this is where your conversational AI agents come into play. This is where the product recommendations come into play that are much more accurate and relevant. This is where we don't have to worry about writing predefined text that might be wrong because we can dynamically generate the text based on reasoning and learning and context. So the engagement improves. Now, let's move to resolving and issue handling. That's where we've all started because the cost associated with customers to serve. So now we're using these agents, which has always been the number one top use case, resolving issues, customer service and support, intelligent customer routing. We're summarizing customer interactions, because that's wonderful data there, whether it's through the conversational experiences that we're recording and now able to transcript and use and understand context and sentiment, or helping the customer service rep with guided call summarizations, right? Two more trends now. Now we move on to optimizing that, right? So that's where we're going to start using all this data again for real-time decisioning and next best action. And then you can start growing. So the whole value expansion, the relationship. We really started with trying to do this value expansion and relationship because everyone's focused on growing. But if we don't have the ability to sense, engage, and resolve, we're not going to grow anything because we won't have the insight.
And sensing seems to be one of those second order functions. We have all of the data, we have the pieces, but we need to actually bring together what that means from sentiment perspectives, understanding where the customer is in the buying journey, overall customer characterization. These are all of those second order functions that, okay, having the data is great. Being able to maintain it across all of these different points of interaction is great. And that next step up is really understanding what that means as far as where that customer is and understanding their state of mind, their purchase path, all of those other good things that give you greater insight.
Yes, absolutely. But we need to do it. I'm going to bring back something that Alex said on one of our podcasts, the 250th anniversary one we did. We need to do it all in a monitoring and audit standpoint with trust and compliance, with cost controls, right? Because this is all great, but these reasoning engines and, where we're putting stuff and all this customer data, it's not an inexpensive endeavor. So we have to do the use cases first with the training that actually has the strongest ROI, right? So that's why everyone's starting either with the employee productivity angles. My lovely cohort, Chris Marsh, has some wonderful research there, and Ethan on talent. And we have to also really understand on the customer service side, the cost to serve. So that's really where a lot of use cases are starting. And we're testing it, we're training it, we're piloting it. Then we're going to really turn it on and grow scaling when it comes to that real-time customer engagement. Because that's the value, that's the growing, that's the relationship expansion.
So is that something where the employee engagement piece is where we really sort of, I guess, cut our teeth in all of this and then expand to customers once we've been able to prove out some of that value? It seems like there are a lot of outfits that are diving right into the customer side first.
And they could, and it's fine. They're diving right into the customer side because a lot of where they're diving first is in the expensive scalability. It's really more customer service. We're not selling yet there. We're going to get there, right? We're really more on the service expansion side today. And that makes sense. And we're also trying to improve our own productivity. So this is where it cuts across every industry, across every space, and how we're using these technologies to improve the employee worker optimization, right? So the digital worker. And I do think that's even relevant today in retail. Think about the store associate. Think about bringing together every time, you're in a store, we still have to optimize these stores. And this is where the human in the loop and some of the digital assistants in store can also play out. And I know I promised to discuss some of that, so I wanted to make sure that we shifted to that. But part of it was also that digital worker, right? And how the store can become an agent-enabled operating environment where the store associates have these, we've seen them, we've been using them. They have them as mobile point of sale, or they have them as clienteling tools, and they are acting as assistants to frontline staff. What we're doing today is also like checking inventory stock or using the QR codes to understand a little bit more about the product, or getting what's up with some of the ingredients. What about pricing optimization in shelf stores? This is where the whole digital experience is going to really change the in-store environment between IoT devices and edge devices, which is your expertise here, and intelligent devices that can really connect physical interactions and operational workflows in a lot of these digital systems. And that is also going to change with the agentic retail execution that is depending on connectivity in the store.
So that's really that step to ensure that you've enabled the digital salesperson, the digital associate. And really, it seems like that what ought to be the table stakes in ensuring that you've got the ability to go get to customers with the set of capabilities that, as you're pointing out, you can prove out on the floor, in the environment, and that then extends into, whatever those next stage customer interactions happen to be, wherever that customer and however that customer actually wants to engage.
Yeah. I mean, some of the stuff on the show floor had robots. I will agree. It was a little weird, right? We've been showing robots for a while there, but think about a lot of times when you're trying to find something and you don't have your size. Let's use an example of the shoe store, right? They don't put shoes and the ability to go out and get it. And there's only so many in-store associates you have helping people pick the right shoe, the guidance, right? We're spending money on someone in the back to go pick the inventory. Well, a robot could do that and bring it right out. Right now, the robots are too expensive. But think where you could have this robotic experience in store to go in and grab stuff and bring it out while the store associates are truly engaging with helping the customer choose something. Guidance, where the human empathy adds value. Not running to the back store trying to find something that they can't find because someone put it in the wrong spot. Because humans just felt like dumping stuff where robots won't.
So maybe that's an interaction where we've got the robot dog who goes to fetch the shoes.
That would be so cute.
Hopefully doesn't chew them up in the process, but it does seem like we've sort of moved through, especially in the conference and convention world. Robot dogs have been sort of all the rage. At NRF, it sounds like humanoid robots were that next stage, but maybe when it comes to shoes, we should be thinking about dogs, but.
Yeah, maybe not dogs with shoes, but it would be cute. Only because a lot of times you do have to get all the way up to the top to try to get this. But anyway.
Well, but that's, I think, the important takeaway in all of this, that this is, again, it's getting back to augmentation. It's ensuring that we've got support in digital form. Now, as we start getting into physical AI with robots, it's bringing all of this together where that value really starts to be delivered.
And everyone is really trying to figure out what is the right use case to start with, where is the right data, and how much is this going to cost me?
Well, and I think as we were discussing earlier in the previous episode, cost is that thing where now that, as with any new technology transition, right? Everybody dashes out, does the thing, and realizes, oh, holy cow, this costs a lot. And now is trying to rationalize, is it worth it? How do I spend it? How do I manage costs? And how do I put this all together in a way that actually starts to make sense and deliver some value? Well, a lot more to talk about, but I appreciate all of the insights. But we're at time for this episode. But thanks for being back, and thanks for all the perspectives on NRF.
Thank you. We have a lot of great data. We love to share it, love to discuss it. And of course, shopping is one of my top topics.
Just make sure to keep the shoes away from your dogs.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that is it for this episode of Next in Tech. Thanks to our audience for staying with us. And thanks to our production team, including Sophie Carr for on mediation, Kira Smith on the marketing and events teams. And I hope you'll join us for our next episode, where we're going to be digging into a whole set of some of these next stages around AI and some of the thoughts about where this is all headed as well. I hope you'll join us then, because there is always something next in tech.